Hi, guys. Good morning. Welcome to Behind the Point. My name is Josue. I'm here with Pastor Jeff this morning.
Hello. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah. It is January 26th, right around 9:50 in the morning. And how's your weekend?
It was good.
Yeah.
I have had a splitting headache, though.
I know. You still have one right now.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry.
I may need your help today.
Yeah,
I know
I'll do my
you're
best.
the host today for
No,
this
that's all right.
episode.
I'm glad to
I may
jump
need
in
you
and
to
help.
answer some questions for me. But otherwise, good. We had a good day at church yesterday. And I, on Friday, got to go to lunch with my parents. So that was nice. And Josh, my little guy, we got some good barbecue.
Oh,
There's a
nice.
really
Where'd
good
you go?
place. Well, it's a little far for you, but in Corona, off of Hidden Valley, I think's the exit.
Yeah.
It's off the 15, right before the 91.
Yeah.
So the exit just north of the 91. It's called Badlands Barbecue, but pretty good. Like it's a order at the counter, and then they bring the food to you and stuff. But I think it's really, really good barbecue.
Cool.
So if you're in the Corona area, that's a recommendation. And then Saturday we did a little. There was Ontario's the city we live in, and they had a snow day at one of the parks. And so it's just a tiny bit of snow. Our kids only played in the snow for like a couple minutes, but they had face paintings. And,
nice.
So they got their, and they had,
Wasn't it like 80 degrees on
it
Saturday?
was, it wasn't that warm. It was a little cooler when we were
Okay.
there, but, they went down the slides or the slope once with the sleds, and then there was a little play area. They didn't bring gloves, so we forgot to bring them gloves. So Sam went in, picked up some ice, threw it at me, and then they were done with that portion of
He was like,
it.
this is too much. Yeah.
But the balloon guys were cool. They made a balloon bow and arrow, so I thought that was kind of cool.
Did it work?
Yeah, it was kind of cool. So they used like one balloon wasn't blown up, and so that was like the string part that you would pull back, and then they made kind of a balloon animal shape like for the bow, and then that the piece that would bend back, and then they just had like a big balloon and tied some things so you could kind of like place it on the string and pull it back, and it was enough to grip it.
Oh, that's cool.
And then you could kind of launch it. So that was fun.
Good.
So they got that. We got some. There were food trucks and stuff, so they got some like lemonade and cookies and stuff. So it was fun.
Cool. Very good. Awesome.
Family time, and then I slept.
Attaboy.
I went to bed early last several nights, so
Yeah.
that was nice.
I don't blame you for that.
Yeah,
That's
hopefully I'm going to the doctor's later, so I'm hoping they'll give me some good medicine.
Very good. We didn't do well. Actually, we did a whole lot of I don't know, I guess busy work. We had on Thursday when I got home, I started working on the crib. One of our guys from church he's adopting his little nephew. And so we have a crib to get rid of. So I sanded it, painted it. My daughter was out there helping me with it,
that's nice.
and finished it up on Friday. And then Saturday, my wife and I, we were up pretty early, and we decided to clean out our garage. Nothing made me happier.
It feels so good.
It was the
doesn't it?
greatest day of my life, just cleaning out that garage. We got rid of so much stuff, and our garage is clean. We organized, like we have these 2 refrigerators and then a deep freezer.
Oh, nice.
So just to have them all together on one wall where they used to kind of be separated from where they landed in there.
You're ready for parties.
Yeah,
2 fridges and
well, it's like
deep
whenever we
freezer in
have
the
our
garage.
kids' birthdays party, we can't fit all the food in our
Right,
fridge, so we put all the stuff in there, and then
That's
my
nice
wife
to
likes
have
to
that.
buy likes to have like chicken and stuff like that on hand in the freezer, chicken nuggets for the kids, things like that. So we always keep those in the deep freezer so it doesn't clutter the main one.
Yeah.
But we had a good time. We worked. My son Matthew, he stayed up Friday to Saturday. He woke up at like 4, just after 4 in the morning. He come in, he was scared. He came into our room and he says, "I gotta go potty." And I'm like, "What are you waking me up for? Just go, you know." Anyway, so he went to the restroom. When he went to lay back down, I realized he was still wide awake on his tablet. And I was like, "Dude, go to bed. Like, turn that thing off and go to bed." So we were supposed to go out and eat Saturday morning. We were going to go out for breakfast or like an early lunch, but we decided, well, Matthew's still asleep.
Yeah,
it's like
let him sleep in.
2 in the afternoon. He's still
gosh.
asleep. No, it wasn't that late, but he didn't wake up till almost noon.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so anyways, after that, later that afternoon, we went to Ontario Mills. We walked around. That was a lot of fun. And Matthew did that human claw thing where you, like the vending machines where you're a claw
that's
and they
funny.
move you around. So that was a lot of fun.
That's cute. So there, he's like laying on
He's laying
something. He
flat.
gets to grab a toy,
And they
or
lower
whatever.
you and they pick up,
How
he
cute.
pick up a toy. That was cool.
Yeah.
And then we went to, what's the restaurant?
Rainforest Cafe. You didn't tell me where you
No.
went.
It's, oh my gosh. I just said
What
it
type
this morning.
of food?
Italian food.
Oh, buca de beppo.
There it is. I always say pico de gallo, but I can never remember what it's called.
Not even close. It's not.
What is it again?
Buca de beppo.
Buca de beppo.
Yeah,
there you go.
buca de beppo.
Okay. So yeah, I remember it's a bump but I can't remember what it says. Like bum. So I say pico de gallo.
I call it buca de bebop. I don't, just for fun.
There you go.
But
yeah,
I know what it's actually.
But it was so good. It was delicious. We had a great time, and then we started heading home.
Where is that?
We went to the closest one to us is Claremont.
Yeah, is one. That's right. Okay, so I've been to one in Brea. There's one at Universal Studios at the Universal Walk.
I think the last time we went, it was in Brea.
Okay, I didn't know there was a Claremont one.
There's a Claremont one. Apparently, there used to be like a Fontana one or something.
Oh,
I don't know. I just heard about that. But anyways, it was delicious, and we were there till about 9:30 in the evening, and the kids knocked out in the car on the way home, and it was a nice, quiet drive home.
Oh, good.
So, and then we were at church all day yesterday. I wasn't even supposed to be on the worship team.
Oh, yeah.
That was a last minute thing, too.
Yeah.
And that was crazy.
Nice to see you up there.
And then I got to teach the kids yesterday.
Oh, yeah. I remember you were
first
doing
grade at 12 o'clock. That was a lot of fun. I got to
Good.
step in and help out. That was probably more stressful than a normal Sunday.
Yeah.
five
Worship
first graders.
Song. Yeah, well,
I was
then,
like, oh my
first
gosh.
Graders. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was fun. We had a good time. That's good. So
Good.
All right. Well, let's jump in. We are continuing our series on Philippians, and you were talking yesterday about imitating Christ's humility. Mm-hmm. So let's start off with just a couple of these questions, because you gave us a series of, what was it, 7 or 8 questions? 8
questions, yeah.
Okay,
he actually had 11, but I just scrapped a couple for time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Chuck Lawless, he has this. So let me start with this. Why do you think that humility is one of these virtues that everybody claims to have? We all want to say we're humble people, right? Or we at least say we are. But few of us can actually say that we are, and we don't even recognize it within ourselves. Why do you think humility we struggle with that to that extent?
I think we feel like we are maybe sometimes because there's some suffering in our life. So maybe we think that we are because we're like, well, I'm sacrificing certain things, or I don't have everything perfect as I would like. So our circumstances have left us feeling humble. What was the other part of it?
Why is it that we can't recognize it?
Why can't we recognize it? I think it's just not as obvious to us as just right out arrogance. If we're boasting about ourselves, and some of those things might be a little bit more obvious, but I think, to be honest, we kind of mirror the people around us. So I think, not to put all the blame on other people, but it's like we're just, I think, in our culture and the way that we operate, like it's normal not to be super humble about stuff. Everyone feels a need to share about things in their life, or wanting to be built up. And so it's really just a fine line. It's good. And as a church, we're called to build each other up, to encourage one another. But I don't know, maybe there's just like something in our heart that just has that pride to want to be recognized, or want to think it's all about me. Some in our culture too, it's like outside the church culture, but just in our country and I guess our world right now, it's, you think things like you do you and be yourself, and it's all about your inner strength and what you accomplish, and then probably standards and things in society for us to feel like where our worth is attached to metrics. Things that we do is what gives us worth. So probably I would imagine a combination of all those things.
When you kind of hit on something right there, that we tend to reflect the people around us. I think that's a lot of where this humble pride comes from, right? That we claim to be this one thing, but in reality, it's a false humility. It's not really our own. It's something that we are copying, we're emulating, that we have seen from somebody else. So why do you think that this false humility or humble pride that we struggle with, why do you think that it's hard for us to detect it in our lives? Because I think that's ultimately what part of those 7 or 8 questions was that we looked at. I loved the final one. Did you dismiss any of these? If you did, you may not be humble.
I think it's hard to detect because it's painful to do that kind of reflection.
Okay.
It's not, and it may not be. It's not as obvious necessarily to other people, too, as some other sin. So it's, from the outside, you could think that I'm just like a really humble person. It's easier to kind of pretend or hide. And so I think it takes some real like self-evaluation. Steve, a good friend at church, he came up to me. He's like, man, he's like, I'm going to be wrestling with this all day. I mean, he was just admitting, he's like, I got some of this stuff, but he's like, man, that put a mirror to me. I'm going to have that up all day, like kind of thinking, but it is like, I mean, it's hard. It's a mirror held up that we got to do some self-examination. So I think the fact that it takes some work and intentionality, it's easy to avoid if we don't want to go down that path.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you had 4 points for us, calling us to imitate Christ's humility. Our first point was to imitate his humility in our mindset.
Right.
So what does that look like? What does it actually mean on a practical level to value others over ourselves? What does it look like for me to practically value somebody over myself without becoming resentful, without becoming passive, or without being fake, without having a sense of false humility, that humble pride? What does it look like practically to do that?
I think it is your first thought always about yourself. And so I guess the practical thing is, am I thinking about like, what would it be like if I was in their shoes? And kind of just as much as you could back away from just like thinking of it all through your lens, just it's being considerate of others is, I guess, the really practical aspect of it. Passive, I mean, it's hard not to be resentful. I think if it's you're intending to like, what is it like to love this other person? What if I was in their shoes? And even giving them the best, the most charitable interpretation or whatever. Okay. So, thinking, I don't know that all they went through. What if they had an awful day? What if there's things in their life, like things done to them that I don't know about? So just kind of giving them the benefit, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what some other people have been through. So I'm going to almost, the way that I could have the mindset to think highly of them would be to give them like, be considerate about how I think about those things. So, anything you would add to that? Maybe.
I think I would have gone with exactly what you just said, with giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Always assume that, again, approaching things with a heart of curiosity. Yeah. Never assume that you're always right or the smartest guy in the room. Don't approach it with end all or be all kind of thing. Yeah. It's always leave room for discussion. Yeah. There are certain times where you need to be decisive and make decisions with certain things or relationships and so forth. But I think legitimate humility comes from just, hey, I don't need to be the main player in this at all times. I'm glad to be part of this. I don't always have to be the main player. And that's kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt, specifically if there's tension in the relationship. I think that would be a really good way to have that sense of legitimate humility with someone, to value someone over myself without being fake, without being resentful, without being passive. Yeah.
I mean, we see it with, I think, of parenting. I see my kids, I often have this conversation with them. It's when we all work together to serve each other, things are more fun and joyful for everyone.
Right.
Like, so if, we want to bless our kids, we want them to be happy. We want them to have fun experiences and treats and all these things, but they also need to listen to Carrie and me. Yeah. And so it's like, hey, if you could, with Sam and Josh, the brothers, if you could just not bother the other person, like don't go and take their toy, right. Don't push, don't try to be annoying, don't tattle on each other. Like if you could just think about being kind, and it's gonna make the environment better for everyone. Because if you're messing with your brother, then guess what? We're gonna get mad,
right?
And then we get angry, and then you're gonna be upset because we had to. So it's like, just think about, what if I thought about like, what's the best? How can I like bless others, and that's gonna come back to benefit me as well.
Now you had You did a really good illustration. I'm trying to see if you did this illustration with the tape measure here for point 1, or was it point 2?
No, it was with point 1.
Was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was. Yeah.
So you did this illustration of distancing ourselves to help us understand just how humble Christ is, in contrast to how humble we often think we are, right?
Right.
So between 1 to 10, we often think so-and-so should be down here and worthy of praise, but we're much closer to the 10. We're up here. But the point is, Christ is infinitely humble, like so much more than we could. And we're quibbling over this tiny little amount there. And so when we picture that distance, that his status to ours, right? Again, with the tape measure, how do you think that helps us reframe the way that we think about serving difficult, or maybe even someone that we've intentionally overlooked?
Yeah. You think all of us are sinners. So we probably played a role in the tension between that other person. Mm-hmm. There's something probably that we've done wrong in the situation. We've fallen short as well, where you think Christ is perfect, and yet how far he came for us.
Right.
So I think just having that mindset.
All the way out the doorway.
Yeah. Right. All the way out the doorway. Yeah. It's just having that in mind. It's like, look, Christ humbled himself so far for me. Mm-hmm. How much more can I do that for someone else? So it's even, I think the framing of it is, it's not even, because it's hard sometimes. There's some very difficult people. Yeah. And it's like, man, there's times it's just like, I am not motivated to want to help them, to want to go and serve, because they're stinkers. Yeah. Like, they're stubborn. They always come. Maybe as we talked about some of those other areas, maybe they always argue. Maybe they always complain. Maybe they're unappreciative. Maybe they feel entitled. They're difficult. But I think it's like, what if I think about what Christ has done for me, maybe the starting point is thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this for Christ, not necessarily let me start with that instead of thinking I just want to bless this other person. Let me think, let me bless Christ by being obedient in this area and serving others. Yeah. So this is an act of worship for him, even though in my mind, I don't immediately want to do this. Let me think about, I'm going to do this for Christ and see if he could soften my heart in the process to just, do the sacrificial thing, step down and serve that person, even when they're undeserving. Mm-hmm. We talk about in counseling a lot, especially in marriage, love and respect. Yeah. The book, the idea is men tend to crave respect as their the highest thing they crave. Women tend to crave love. When the couples are not giving that thing to the other, it creates the crazy cycle. But the way to interrupt it is to, even if you're not feeling respected, is to love anyways. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not feeling loved, respect anyways. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's kind of similar, even like really in any relationship. Even if you're not feeling like that person deserves it or you're getting back what you want from them, just be the bigger person. Right. Represent Christ. Love them anyways. Serve them anyways.
Cool. Very good. Now, if you had to try and explain this to someone who's an entirely unchurched person, how would you distinguish this? If Jesus is fully God, why then is humility more than just a good example?
Yeah.
So Jesus is fully God, but why is that humility more than just a good example? And why does it actually redefine for us our understanding of power and greatness?
Why humility is more than just an example? Well, for Christ, for us, it was necessary. Jesus is coming. His main reason that he came was to die for our sins. And of course, there's much more that he did. He taught, he performed all these miracles, revealing his power and authority, throughout his ministry. He prepared the church for the future, but his main task was humbling himself to come and be the sacrificial lamb for our sins. That was the only way that could right our relationship with Christ. Right. So there's more than just him being a humble example. It was his role, his purpose in coming. It was necessary for him to be humble. Okay. Our purpose, I think it's necessary for us to be humble, because our purpose, part of what I was trying to communicate was, in the same way that in chapter 1 of Philippians, Paul talked about suffering being a means to advance the gospel. Our humility is also a means to advancing the gospel. It's necessary for us as believers. We want the gospel to go out into the world. We want the kingdom of God to come on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
We must be humble. That's it's different than Christ, but in our role, as in Christ's role, humility was necessary for him to fulfill that. Our role, it's also necessary for us to fulfill his purposes. What did I answer the other part of that?
Well, how does it help us redefine our understanding of power and greatness?
Yeah, I guess for us, the humility part, power and greatness all belongs to God, and he's gonna. And it kind of this will, I think we talked more about on point number 2 about work, but it's him working in us. So power and greatness, it's all about, when we humble ourselves, something happens that it frees us up to being used by God. When we get out of the way of ourselves, the Holy Spirit comes in and equips us, empowers us to be way more effective than we ever would be on our own. But we have to be in a humble state in order for that to take place. Because if we're prideful, we're in the way we're interrupting that ability, in a sense, for God to use us in that way.
The only thing I would add to that is I think oftentimes what stands in the way of us being humble is the fear of sacrificing greatness, the fear of sacrificing our power. I don't want to give that up. But I love the definition of what it is to be meek, which can be somewhat synonymous with humility. And it's strength under control. And that's what I think that's what really adds. When we understand that humility takes an incredible amount of power, an incredible amount of greatness, it will redefine, it will shift the way our mind sees humility. And suddenly it will be something that we crave. Not just something like, I'll try and be humble. It's, I want to emulate Christ. I want to look like him in every element of my life. And it requires a whole breakdown and reconstructing of our understanding of humility.
I agree. Cool. I think I like that power under restraint. And that's, I guess, and that's the humble part. And that power is being used appropriately and not you're not taking advantage of.
Yep. Absolutely. Great caveat. Okay, your second point was we're also called to imitate Christ's humility in our work. So work out your salvation with fear and trembling, right? That's the full text that you use there. You pull that from Philippians 2:12 through 13. It says, continue to work at your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you and will act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Now, you mentioned in and of itself, you said that sounds uncomfortable. That's an uncomfortable phrase, to work out your salvation in that way. Why do you think that people bring fear into that phrase? Or let me put it this way. Why does it make us uncomfortable? Why does it make us fear? Why does it make us uncomfortable? What do you think Paul was trying to communicate with that?
I think it makes people uncomfortable because it's misinterpreted. So taken out of context, it sounds like, oh man, we gotta I could easily lose my salvation, apparently, if I don't work it out. So I think it's been misused as that, which is why just reading through it quickly, it's like, oh, what does that mean? And with fear and trembling, it's, do I need to be worried about losing my salvation? So I think that's the fear part of it. How does Paul correct them? I think immediately after that statement is the correction in this text. So in verse 13, so it's work out my salvation. Okay, that sounds scary, but then he clarifies, it is God who works in you. So it's God that's working out the salvation in us. Again, we allow him to do that work in us. So that's the humility piece, is we surrender to him to work out what we could not do on our own. And then it's the same Paul that writes in Ephesians that we're saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. And all throughout the New Testament, it's very clear that it's faith, that it's not our own work, but it's faith that is the thing that saves us.
So it's repeated over and over again that it's not our doing, it's not our work. But why do you think it's so tempting for people, believer and unbeliever alike? Why do you think it's so tempting for people to believe that God needs our competence more than he does our dependence?
Yeah, I think it's because everything else in our world requires our work. You want to earn money? I mean, for the most part. I mean, obviously God's blessings, and sometimes we get lucky or blessed or whatever, but it's like, You want to earn money, or you want to make a living, you have to work. Mm-hmm. You want your relationship to get better, you need to put work into doing that.
Right.
You want to, I don't know, you want to see improvements in society, you got to work to make that. So I think everything else is like, it's hard work. You want to excel in sports, you need to train hard.
What's that?
I know. No. But I mean, you see, you mentioned, did you mention Michael Jordan, basketball player? I think last week or a couple weeks ago. But that whole principle, it's like he practiced. He was the best player on the courts, right? But he was, and Kobe Bryant did the same thing, also basketball.
Thank you.
Tiger Woods, golf. But these guys, it's like they're the best of the best. Even when they were at the top of their game, they knew they had to work to keep that skill by doing the boring things. Right. I got to keep working. So it's most things in our culture, most ways to get ahead and to do better is to put in the work. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's natural to have that temptation to think, I got to do that in my relationship with God.
Right.
And in, when it comes to spirituality. And so, but the truth is it's a little bit counterintuitive to know it starts with surrender for us.
Okay.
So,
yeah. How would you describe to someone who's never heard of the ideal of humility or allowing God to work in us? How would you describe to someone, how would you tell them, what would you tell them is the difference between working for God and allowing God to work through them?
Yeah, I would say working for God is we get in the habit of thinking, I got to do more. Mm-hmm. I need to join a Bible study every night of the week. I need to fast like crazy. Fasting is giving up food or something for God. So I think I feel like I'm working for the Lord, we do things that are end up leading to burnout, things that are not sustainable.
Oh,
so we think that it's, I just got to put in more. Mm-hmm. Now there is a time we are called to serve and step up and take, mature in our faith. Part of our mission is become fully devoted as we mature in Christ. Yes, we should, God has more responsibilities for us. He takes us, through seasons of more maturing, and sometimes that comes with more responsibility and time and other commitments. But we have to be careful. It's not, I'm just doing. Whereas what we're called to do is let God work in us. Mm-hmm. So it's more of, I think it's the starting point is, God, what would you like me to do? God, what are some of the areas you want me called to? Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of entering more, instead of just feeling like I got to like respond and come up with all these ideas on my own. It's more taking time to reflect and pray, like, Lord, is this something you want me to get into? What are the things you want me to see? What are the things you want me to learn? Now, some people take that too far and they're like, I'm not going to do anything until I feel a clear sign from God.
Yeah.
So I caution against that. Like, can you pick up the trash? Well, I'm going to need to pray on that. Like, okay, no, like if there's God, he's presenting an opportunity for you. But if it's, would you like to lead a small group? Okay, that's a bigger commitment. Right. Yeah, let me pray on that and make sure that's the right thing for this season. So it's, there's a balance to all these things, but I think it's more allowing God to direct you instead of running into all of these different areas.
Awesome. Cool. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3 was we're called to imitate Christ's humility in our words. And that comes from Philippians 2:14 through 18. Yep. And this speaks of the grumbling and the arguing and so forth. And why do you think that grumbling and arguing feels so justified to us in the moment? As we're doing it, we feel I'm entitled to say these things. I'm allowed to complain. Why do you think we feel justified in doing that, even though we know it's destructive, even though we know it's doing damage to our spiritual maturity, and even I would go as far as to say to the sort of the testimony of our lives, our Christian witness.
Yeah.
Why do you think we justify that?
I think we justify it because when we think we're coming from a righteous position, that there is indeed a better way to do things.
Okay.
And we're not always wise about thinking through, is this thing actually like a biblical standard, or is this my perspective? So I'll say a controversy. I'll probably make some people mad about this, but worship. We get a lot of people complain about worship.
No.
Some people are like, they want to hear hymns all the week, or I mean, probably my like peak time of worship. Some of my favorite songs were probably like in the 2010s ish, 2007 or whatever. Like that's when but that a lot of times it's like there's a certain period in your life when it's like that's when the music really hit and stuff. And that's when I was leading worship, like kind of starting out. Yeah. So that was kind of a meaningful time for me as far as like style and stuff. But and the reality is it's a preference. Right. The Bible doesn't say only sing these words, or the Bible actually says sing a new song to the Lord. I think we have to think, is this my opinion and perspective and preference, or is this actually a thing that's that I should like, that is worth complaining about or arguing about? There's some hills we need to die on. Right. If you start preaching that we're saved by works, yeah, people need to probably stand up and argue and grumble. Yeah. But if it's something that's an area of preference, or we could have some grace toward one another and in stylistic choices, how frequently we do communion, exactly, how it's presented, how we do baptisms, and maybe it's other things like maybe it's even some things in the home of how things are done. I think it's always good to kind of step back and think, is it preference? And then it doesn't mean those things can't be talked about, but it's just the grumbling is just a like grumpy attitude. You're coming in already with the wrong heart and mindset. Right. Same with arguing. Right. I'm just in it to win it. I'm coming in hot. I'm mad. Versus like, hey, would you be open to talking about this? I think like I have some ideas. Like I think it'd be kind of cool. Would you be willing to consider for worship doing this at times in the home? Like, hey, we've been doing kind of approaching parenting this way. Can we talk about how we discipline our kids? Whatever those things are. It's like hard topics, but coming in a little bit softer with humility, that, hey, maybe I could be proven wrong. Maybe there's something with your perspective that I've not yet considered. Yeah. So
I think you've kind of answered the next question we were going to look at, because you mentioned what certain people grumble or complain about. And I think what that does is it reveals what they believe they are entitled to. And I think you hit the nail right on the head.
And in all fairness, I complain about stuff. Yeah. I've grumbled, and it's like in hindsight, I think, okay, I just came from an entitled perspective.
The point I think behind that is it is personal preference. Yeah. It's just to use an example that you just used now, when it comes to worship, people will say to us, I don't know if they've said it to you, they've certainly said it to me before, that did nothing for me. That didn't do it. I didn't care. I'm like, did you think we were singing to you? That's kind of the thought that comes to mind. Yeah. And I mean that, I don't mean that to sound harsh, but I mean it sincerely. Did you think we're singing? The worship is not for you. The worship is for God. Right. And the point is, they feel they are entitled to an emotional movement of some sort. And it's all because that's my preference. Yeah. You just described the preference of songs that you like. And to you, that would be like, if we ever did a service like that, that would probably just, man, that one for sure would hit home for you immediately, because you're like, these nailed all the things that I like, all of my preferences, it hit them right on the head. So this is wonderful. But I think it does, as we complain about them, it's because we feel we are entitled to our preferences. And that's not what church is about. Right. And that's a hard truth. We think like, well, that this is, and a lot of that comes down to how our understanding of Scripture, our understanding of how worship is described, for example, just to stick with worship. But sorry, that was just a random rant there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard because in everything, or not everything, but a lot of things we do, we have choices now. What do we want to watch? What kind of school do we want our kids in? Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've got it's easy to get the mentality, come to a church to serve all of my preferences. And I get in finding a church before coming to Center Point, I visited lots of my congestion's getting worse.
Yeah, that's okay.
Before coming to Center Point, we visited several churches, and there were a lot of churches.
Awful, weren't they?
I know. Yeah, only Center Point's the best in the world. But there were some, it's like the culture was not quite like a good fit, I think, for myself or, for the church, for me to be a pastor there, or for my family. But they're Bible believing, wonderful churches, just as important in the kingdom as Center Point or others. And so you have to find, it's okay to want to find some of those preferences. Right. But there's a time for us to yield and be like, okay, I'm also have to be open to not everything's perfect. And, but the nice thing now, if you don't love, it's not your preference style worship at Center Point. Now we have Spotify and CDs or, digital music.
CDs.
I know. Well, some people still do. I said that only because some people still do. I don't anymore, but some people do.
He said CDs.
I know.
You got 8 tracks and
I know. Well, some people do. But it's so I listen to some of my. I like our worship at church, and I'm thankful for Crystal and Wilson and the team and I sing on it sometimes too. You do too, but I also like listening to some of my own music of worship artists and stuff that I really enjoy, and even pastors. It's like you and I will listen sometimes to sermons from other pastors, but we come here and we fellowship, and the church is beyond just the service meeting my needs. And sometimes we don't want to just tickle your ears every time. I hope that there's sometimes like you preach and it's like, oh, that convicted me. That's not the message I wanted to hear, but that I needed to hear.
Sure. Yeah.
And so all those things in balance.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so Paul's charge, and we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks here still, is rejoice. And again, I say rejoice, right? So how is it that we can choose the language or even a temperament of rejoicing, especially in the middle of hard seasons, in the middle of that hardship? How do we do that without being fake?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
I think we balance it with, it's okay to, we've talked about lament here a bit in recent weeks and stuff, but it's okay to lament and share those difficult, honest truths with God. Like, I feel like I'm abandoned. I'm suffering. Lord, help me. Where are you? Why are you not changing the circumstances? Yeah. It's okay to have some of that in our prayer time, in our the way we talk with God. But the joy piece is find some things that you can still appreciate. Okay. I know there's people in much more difficult circumstances than I'm in. But I know that there's good things. If the only thing good in your life is Christ crucified and risen, that is enough. That should be enough joy to last. That's enough joy to last eternity. That's assuming you don't have anything else good. No relationships in your life. No benefit in your health situation. No money at all. Like, we always have the cross of Christ to be thankful for. And I think if we really do, step back, we'll see more than just that. Yeah. I mean, all of that God's given to us. We have his whole word given to us, the 66 books that make up scripture. That, past generations, before our Bible was put together, these books, the Old Testament, they didn't have that. They didn't know about, before Christ, they were hoping for the Messiah. We have the privilege this generation to look back and see what he's already done, all that Jesus is, all that he's fulfilled. We have the Holy Spirit present with us. So even if we're in the most intense suffering, God's still there, and we know that we have hope for eternity. Yeah. So there's joy there. But I would say most of us probably have some relationships. And maybe all the people you love have passed, but I would say, thank you, God, for the time I had with so-and-so. Yeah. Thank you for sparing me. Lord, even in my suffering, I had this situation happen in this, but I'm thankful that I didn't go down these roads that some other people have endured. I'm going to celebrate that and have joy in that. I'm thankful that I have breath in my lungs today. I'm thankful. And I, most of us, I think, would be able to have a ton of things. Thank you for this food I get to eat. Thank you for blankets. we think of several in our church that come who are homeless, but I thank God that I have a heater that I could turn on at home, knowing not a lot of people have, or there's a lot of people that don't have that, especially around the world, that I could turn on television for entertainment, that I could do some fun things with my kids. So just finding, like, I know all of those things are just extras and bonuses, but I'm really glad that those are gifts from the Lord. And so I'm going to hang on to all of those celebrations that I can. And as now, it's as I think of those things, suddenly it's like my attitude changes, because I could complain today about my nose and headache, but I'm like, but God's so good. Yeah. This I know will pass. And he's got me through stuff before. Yeah. Like, he's going to get me through this. And he's been so good in all those other things.
Well, I think
so now I'm happy again.
I think that's the point. I think that's the point that Paul is saying when he talks about arguing and grumbling. He's not saying we can't voice our concerns.
Correct.
He's simply saying to develop a different posture when we do it. Yeah.
Right.
Remember.
Yeah.
Kind of what you.
And I wanted to emphasize. I hope it landed as I preached, but it doesn't mean never bring your concerns, because we are a family as a church. We lift each other up with prayers. So thank you for the staff praying for me this morning for my headache. Yeah. So we come together, and it's important we do.
Complaining an awful lot. So
I know.
No, I was kidding. All right, your last point here, and then we'll wrap up so you don't have to keep talking. I'm sorry, thanks. I feel bad for you. Our last point here is we're called to imitate Christ's humility in our legacy. Yep. And this is just kind of Paul's closing remarks here as he closes out Philippians 3. But he mentions two fellows here, Timothy and Epaphroditus. And both of these guys are technically not famous. I mean, Timothy's got letters written to him. Yes, we know that. Yeah. But Paul honors both of these guys very deeply. You can tell he loves these guys very much, the way he talks about them. What do you think that tells us about how God measures faithfulness? Obviously, Paul addressed what they were doing in their faithfulness. Yeah. So on a very applicable level for us, what do you think that tells us about how God measures our faithfulness? These guys, I mean, by all rights, unless you've read the Bible, these are Epaphroditus. Timothy, maybe. Epaphroditus is kind of a no-name. Who
right.
is that?
This may be the only reference from him. I didn't check that.
Yeah, I think you're right. But he's not mentioned anywhere else.
Yeah.
So what is it? What do you think that tells us about how God measures faithfulness?
Yeah. I mean, God looks at what do we do with what's been given to us. We don't have, I'm thankful that there's people who have a lot of money that have given to the church and charities. Like, that's very cool. But what's really cool too is those who have very little and gave what they could. I mean, the widow's mite. There's the parable in scripture. Jesus sees a poor woman giving her last penny, essentially, and he says that woman's given more than all these other people. Yeah. And so I think it's, what do we do with what we've been given, with our platform, whatever that be? Maybe the only people you influence are a couple people in your family, but do so faithfully. Maybe you have lots of skills and talents. Well, how are you using those for the Lord? Faithfulness is about, I use the word too, steadfastness.
That's right.
Stick with it. And actually, faith in Scripture, when we talk about being saved by faith, by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, faith is more than just believing. It's a trust in God, but it's also, it's more closely related to that word faithful. Now, of course, Jesus is the one who is faithful. We put our trust in the one who is faithful. He's done it all. Yeah. He's the one that's opened the door. But the call for the believer is to live lives that are faithful. And you think about in relationships, how are you faithful with your wife? You stick with her. You're not going after other women. You're honest with her. You're thinking about, you provide for her. You work with her. You're seeking to grow that relationship, and that's same thing with Christ. Now, he's the one that leads us, and we can't quite match. It's not like a marriage where we're equal and match.
Right.
But in that relationship, it's, I'm pursuing him. I want to be obedient to him. I want to stick with him. I don't want to run after all these other things. I want to stick with Christ, keep my eyes fixed on him, and to the best of my ability, knowing I'm still a broken person, is stay on the straight and narrow path with him. My path will look a little bit different than yours, and so will Damien's. It's because it's what's God presented before us. Who are the people that He's put in our life to minister to? Who are the families that that we have to minister to? So I think that's kind of the biggest thing. He's not gonna say, "Why didn't you do as much as Moses?" He's gonna say, "What did you do with what I've given you?" And the hope is that we hear in the end, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's my hope that He says that about me.
So I guess that answers this question I was going to ask you here. If someone were to tell your story years from now, what would you hope that they'd say marked your life above all else?
Yeah. I guess the first thing that comes to mind.
Sorry,
is
it's kind of a heavy question.
No, I think it's good to think on. The first thing that comes to mind is that was a man that loved well. Like, he loved God and he loved people. And, that was hopefully just demonstrated in how people's affections for me and ways I was able to hopefully tangibly serve. So,
awesome.
Yeah. What about you?
About what they'd say about me?
Yeah. Or what you hope they'd say about you?
I think my first concern would be that I loved my family well, that I was a good husband, I was a good father, beyond just what I demonstrated to my wife and my kids, like what people could see.
Yeah,
I would want that it was, and not in the sense that I put on a show, but in that it was just evident.
Yeah,
and then that I served the Lord faithfully.
Yeah,
like I want them to, because again, my family is my first assignment.
Yeah, agree.
And then it's that I served the Lord faithfully as a pastor, that I helped, that, I don't know, that I was able to help someone in a time of need, in a moment of crisis, and in seasons of celebration, that I was there, that there was a commitment, a level of not just, again, we say it all the time, we get paid to do something that we would gladly do for free, and that it's like that I would still be there regardless of what's going on. Yeah. I think that's probably where and that I was funny.
As you say, keep working on that one, buddy.
I'm working.
That was a guy who knew sports.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
Just kidding.
That's what I want them to do. Okay.
When you shared about just loving your family first, the thing I admired most about my previous pastor, I was at a church for 18 years with Pastor Steve Erth. He was my youth pastor, then he planted a church and I went with them. So I was there the whole time until I came to Center Point. I told him this. I said, he was a good pastor. He poured a lot into me. There's a lot I learned from him in the church and as in leadership. And I'm thankful for a lot that he taught for me ministry wise. But the thing that I admired the most, that I learned the most from him, was watching him as a dad and husband. And he truly really invested in his family. And so that was always something I feel like that was the best lesson that I learned from him, was watching how he loved his wife and how he loved his kids individually too. He would, and still to this day, he finds the unique things that they're passionate about. So it's his kids like Pokemon, so he'll learn Pokemon and play with them. They're in bands, so he learns about music or the bands that they're listening to. And so I think that's just so neat. And that's inspired me to want to do that with my boys. I want to be engaged with them and love my wife as well. So,
Well, let's close with this. Can you give us one small intentional way that someone could practice a Christ-like humility this week without announcing it?
Without announcing it. I would encourage them to find someone that's a little bit difficult to serve and do a kind act. And they, that's on them to figure out what that is. Maybe that's praying for them, or maybe it's actually doing something tangible.
Yeah. And those
nice? Can be, what would be a nice thing for that person?
Those can be incremental too. I mean, start with praying for them. If they're really a difficult person, just start with a prayer.
And it doesn't have to be the most difficult person. It could be someone that's just a little bit difficult person that normally you wouldn't do that for. Yeah. And we'll work up to that one who they thought about on their scale on on Sunday if they need to.
All right. Well, challenge accepted.
Okay.
I'll be praying for you this week. And no, I was kidding.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Damien. All right, what can I do for you, Damien? No.
Well, challenge accepted, guys. You've heard it there. It's just simple things to do. We can start with prayer, or we can go beyond that in larger steps, larger bite sizes, whatever that looks like. But do something that honors the Lord with humility, a Christ-like humility this week for somebody who can be difficult. And again, that looks in many different ways. Thanks for joining us today. Any final closing words? Anything you want to add in? We're good?
Nope, I'm good. Ready
Thanks again for joining us, guys. We're glad you guys were here. If you got any questions, comments, concerns you want us to hit on to conversations you'd love to engage with us in here, you can email us at podcast@centerpointchurch.church. Make sure and like and subscribe wherever you're watching, if it's on YouTube, or subscribe on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or on our website or the app. All right. So love you guys. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.